Welcome to Lawsuits and Lessons. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm here with my great friend John Fagerholm. And how you doing, John?
I'm doing fantastic, Steve. It's been a great couple of weeks.
Okay, I have a question for you, and it's not legal advice. Don't worry. It's a legal question now. I hear people call themselves an attorney, a lawyer, an esquire. Is there any difference, or is there any? I mean, I see people use these different titles. Like you on LinkedIn, it says John Fagerholm, attorney. What is the difference? Anything?
I've heard different things and I've never really looked into it. I don't think there's much of a difference between lawyer and attorney. I think maybe attorney is just a little more formal. Esquire, and don't quote me on this because I could be wrong and maybe I'll look it up later, but I think Esquire is anyone that's gone through law school, because anyone that's passed the bar doesn't use Esquire, right? So I think it's anyone that's gone to law school. And what people don't realize is that anyone that's gone to law school actually has a doctorate. So we're all doctors also. It's just we never do it. So I'm actually Dr. John Fagerholm.
That's awesome. So I know you're a lawyer, you're a doctor. I mean, I'm telling you, it's wonderful. It's great. So in the past episodes, all these episodes, you've brought friends of yours on, people you know. And then tonight we did something different. We brought someone that I know. And I'm very excited to have him on because, he did Cooper Talk and they did the Coop Tank as a guest and he's a Coop Tank as a panelist. And I knew you're a big basketball fan. Do you follow baseball? Are you a Dodgers fan?
No, not really. And definitely not a fan of Dodgers fans.
No one's a fan of Dodger fans. It's like, forget about it. But he's had an amazing career. I mean, he was the GOAT of mascots. He was the original Philly Phanatic. It does not get bigger than that in that world, but he's branched after that and done some really cool entrepreneurial stuff. And I want to introduce our guest today. So my friend is Mr. Dave Raymond. How you doing, Dave?
Hey, I'm doing great, Coop. This is super. I knew when you gave me the title of the podcast, I felt like I had to show up or I might get arrested. So, but hearing your intro, I'm thinking, oh, cool, I'm safe. I'm all comfortable. Don't have to worry. I can unlock my doors. Everything is great.
I don't know much about Philly sports except the 76ers. I grew up a Dr. J fan, so I did follow the Sixers. And also I was a fan of Charles Barkley also. So I followed it a little bit until he got traded to, was it
Phoenix?
Oh, Phoenix. That's right. He went to Phoenix first and then Houston. But what does that mean, the original Phillies fan?
You can see that. That's my alter ego. So in the speaker world, they call you an A+ speaker, which means if someone says your name or introduces you, they don't know you until you qualify by saying, oh, he was the original Philly Phanatic. So the Phanatic was born in 1978. I was just 21 years old. It was a summer job that I received. And for whatever reason, I was a good test dummy for what might have sounded to many people as a bad idea to have a Muppet created for the Phillies mascot. And I just got in it. And for 16 years, it was one of the greatest rides you could ever imagine. To be famous while you're inhabiting that alter ego and be completely anonymous when you're not. So I got the best part of fame with none of the drawbacks of being known. I could walk away and no one would know who I was. So I'm thrilled that you said that you're not a Dodgers fan because neither am I. But what's interesting is I got to know Dr. J pretty well. And Charles Barkley was actually one of my seed investors for my business when I left the Phillies. So some of the best people that you'll ever meet too. You can be a fan of them as athletes, but two of the most wonderful people on the planet. So I was blessed to get to know and spend time with each of them.
That's interesting. So first of all, I've never met someone that was a famous mascot. So you're my first. I go to quite a few Spurs games because I split my time between San Antonio and Los Angeles, and I've always wondered, the Coyote. Like who is that guy and how do they pick him? And also, is there two of them? Because I noticed there's like different mannerisms on one of them versus the other. So I've always wondered what happens when the guy gets sick, like just all these questions that I've had. So I'll ask you these questions. But when I was growing up in Seattle or going to college in Seattle, one of my buddies, the Supersonics had a mascot called Squatch. And we would go to bars and my buddy would tell the girls that he was Squatch. And for some reason, they really liked it.
This is so great, Coop. It's so good to have John. who doesn't have this connection and understanding about this world. And you just asked three great questions, and all three of them good friends of mine. So to answer the coyote question, there was an original guy. His name is Tim Dirk. He was one of the most amazing performers, and the physicality and the performance it takes to be good at this is the highest level of physical performance and nonverbal comedy and spontaneous comedy, improv. All of these things go into it. And Tim Dirk was one of the most amazing ones. And Squatch, Mark Davis, who left when they left Seattle, he kicked off the Thunder's mascot, Rumble. And Mark is a wonderful person. He's now officially retired, and the different mannerisms can sometimes come when you pass on the responsibility to what we like to call the next best friend of Rumble or the next best friend of the Phanatic. But I was blessed with having a young man who was my backup or my understudy, I guess you'd call it, in the world of theater for 5 years. He now has been the Phanatic's best friend for 31 years. So I left after 16 years, and the Phanatic's going to be 50 in 2 years. It is phenomenal what the Phanatic has become, and many of the characters you've talked about have the same type of capture with their fans and their community, because they're not just entertaining fans at these sporting events. They're going out in the community and doing wonderful, amazing things for their community, including underserved kids who are dealing with special needs. I mean, these mascots just do this work, and most people just see them at the sporting events and don't recognize all the work that they do outside of the arenas, outside of the stadiums.
Wow, that's amazing. And Coop and I met because I was a 76ers fan, and I started talking about some of the players that people just wouldn't know. And so that's how we ended up connecting and becoming friends at a bar. But I saw this, and I can't remember who it is, but I saw this interview with this guy, this Hollywood guy, and I just can't remember who it is now. But he grew up in he was a ball boy or something for the 76ers. Kareem, that was really mean to him as a kid, but he said Dr. J was just always so great to him. Dr. J just really treated him well. So then when he got in the entertainment business, and then there were all these needs for celebrities to do commercials or whatever, and people would say, well, what about Kareem? And he's like, no, Dr. J. So he ended up sending a lot of business to Dr. J, and then they became very good friends, according to him. So I always remember that, because I obviously never met Dr. J, but I thought, okay, that seems like a good guy.
The Phanatic became popular very quickly in an age when there wasn't social media, and it was a surprise, especially to the people with the Phillies, which is one of the reasons why they trusted a 21-year-old kid and said, just go have some fun. But he developed quickly, and so we recognized from a game day entertainment, there was opportunity to use the Phanatic in many different ways. So we created an interstitial in between innings or during rain delays called Phanatic Around Town. And the concept was the Phanatic would just show up somewhere, and you would watch whatever mayhem would happen. In the beginning, that's exactly what we did. Pulled up the Phanatic van, he jumped out, interacted with the people, they filmed it, and something funny would happen. It got to be so popular that then we started producing these. So one of the ones we did was the Phanatic shows up at a small gymnasium somewhere, and he's looking around, he's picking up the basketball, and all of a sudden somebody comes and taps him on the shoulder, turns around, it's Julius. And so the Phanatic goes crazy. He hugs Julius, and then he's like, come on, let's go, let's play. So we did this whole routine where the Phanatic was beating Dr. J, and he finished by jumping over the top of Dr. J and dunking over him. And of course, we had the special effects to do that. And I remember being off camera when they said, okay, Julius, now the Phanatic is going to be dunking over your head. Make some sort of expression of amazement. And, I wasn't thinking of Julius as an actor, and he was so amazing. He goes like this. And it was it got a standing ovation in the stadium when people were, because they were so excited that Julius was playing basketball with the Phanatic. And I was there for maybe a half a day doing this, and he couldn't have been nicer. He was asking me questions about what it was like, who was my favorite Phillies player. I mean, so he just had he's a good human being. It's obvious.
I mean, when it comes to mascots, it's the GOAT. And, and it's just not because I'm from Philly. And it's just because the Phanatic. I mean, San Diego Chicken Man was okay, but short lived, short lived. We're not talking about that. But now you did that for 16 years, and I want to talk. We want to talk also about the things you've done after that. But why did you leave? What was the point when you said, you know, it's been 16 years, and I'm sure it was physically draining because that costume's so heavy, and you told me it stunk. The costume stunk inside. So why did you eventually leave?
Well, we finally figured out a way to get it so it didn't stink so much. We recognized that we had to wash it. I mean, we're not talking about a high level intellectual capacity to do this, to do that type of work. And, but I left because it's interesting to be on a show where John is the host. That I knew that because of the precedent that was set long, long ago during the Lone Ranger, when Clayton Moore tried to sue the producers to own the character that he had created. I mean, he was a human who was just wearing a simple little mask. It was pretty obvious it was Clayton Moore, but he lost in court, and they said no. The people who created the show, the story, the writing, and the character, they own that character because you're the actor who's portrayed him. You have no standing to own that right or that copyright. So that I knew, and the Phillies were very kind to me. They paid me well. They took good care of me. I was truly part of their family. But I just saw one, I was getting a little tired of doing the same thing. Even though it was a beautiful, wonderful experience, I was getting creatively, I felt, stale, and I wanted to do this for myself. And I thought if I could create my own character, I knew that I could travel anywhere in the country and entertain because I was doing that as the Phanatic. I was getting hired by Cincinnati organizations to do their minor leagues. I was getting hired by the CBA at the time. The Development League is now that feeder for the NBA, but it was the CBA. They were minor league basketball teams all over the country, and I would travel as the Phanatic and do those. So I said, well, I'd like to decide for myself when I take a pay cut, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. My brother worked for J.P. Morgan at the time, finance guy. He could help me with the business plan. And so I decided to create my own character. And oddly enough, the people who designed the Phanatic became my partners. And for 7 years, we had a company called Acme Mascots. And I traveled all over the country and entertained as a character called Sport that we owned. That transitioned into me building a business, Raymond Entertainment, which I'm wearing. I just got done with an event tonight where I was helping an organization develop a new mascot. And I just felt like this was the time for me to move on and to become an entrepreneur. And when my partners wanted to retire, I started running a business where I was teaching people how to create their own mascot. And in the dissolution of that partnership, I just gave up rights to Sport because I realized I was getting at the end of my performance like I knew I would at someday. So I performed for almost 28 years, and 16 as the Phanatic, and the rest for the 7 years I worked for my partners. But also when I created Raymond Entertainment, we created our own character brand, which I inhabited for another 4 or 5 years, then turned it over to a young, talented performer. And what I was doing was going and teaching organizations, colleges, universities, corporations, sports teams, how to create their own mascot or how to make their mascot more effective for them. And I still do that. Raymond Entertainment is still involved, but as you had mentioned, Coop, my speaking and talking about building happiness, because the Phanatic was a random act of kindness machine, and I learned what we all could be doing to be happier. So it's transitioned, and I'm just slowly out of the mascot business and really doing mostly public speaking is really the way I'm spending most of my time now.
Wow, that's awesome, Dave. That's quite the journey. And that's what I love about talking to entrepreneurs. And, even the ones that I represent, there's always these businesses that you would never think of. Like I would never think that there's a business related to mascots. In my head, a group of owners get together and they sit down and they go, what should the mascot be? And then they go, hey, how about this? They all vote yes. And then, so I didn't think there was a whole world around this, but that's amazing.
Those would be the ones that wouldn't be successful. Those are the ones that fail, because it needs to start with deeply investing time and understanding the story of your organization, the story and history of your sport, and the story and history of the people who love you and your community, and what type of challenges your community has. Once you get that story crafted, that story needs to be the story of your character, because then when people ask you why, you have an authentic answer is, well, he looks like this because he came from here. He struggled with this. We helped him. I should say he, she, or it. We helped this character become whole again. And now it can't wait to show everybody else how they can do the same thing. And then the love and passion of the sport and the team automatically pulls people in. But the character inhabits what is the story that every fan has that story about how they got connected to their team. And once you do that, the imagery starts to bubble up when you get that story. And then it goes to a designer who tries to create the visuals that fit that story, whether it's a tattoo, a scar. I mean, if you look at the Denver Nuggets mascot, Rocky, he's a mountain lion. He looks like a Disney mountain lion until you look at his tail, and his tail is this huge thunderbolt. Well, that fits with the environment, with the nature and the weather in that area. And he is a mountain lion, so he comes from the Colorado Rockies. His name is Rocky, so that fits. And he is their mountain lion specifically, and looking and feeling like their character. So you need to do work. It's hard work to do this right, and really wildly creative work. And when you get the right things to come together, you get Gritty, which is I did the same. I did that work with the Flyers to produce Gritty, which by all measures is about as well known and as any mascot that's ever been created, because the Flyers did it right. They did all that hard work. They didn't just say, "Hey, let's create a mascot. That looks funny. Let's put that in there." That's not going to work.
Yeah, I've always wondered. So, for example, the few mascots that I can think of off the top of my head, for example, the Hornets, they have that light blue bee. That makes sense to me, but Squatch never made sense to me, and I'm not sure that the Coyote makes sense to me.
But if you look at their backstory, it connects them to that area. So the coyote is from nature, out in, all throughout that area of the country. The coyote is a mainstay, and has really grown through all kinds of challenges to be a very robust species. So it works in the ecosystem there. So coyotes are really an important part of the ecology, and considered a pest by many, but they're not. They're very helpful with that. So that's why the coyote's there, and because he comes from that area. But he is their coyote. I love his routine with his eyeballs pop out of his head when he gets hit too hard. So
Well, you'll have to explain this Squatch to me then.
he's a little bit of an outlier, but look, he's a Yeti, right? So you're up in the Seattle, you're close to mountain ranges, from the Rockies to up north into Canada, and he invaded the Puget Sound, but he was a Sasquatch that didn't want to create mayhem, eat anybody, kill anybody. He just wanted to come because he loved basketball. I think the performance by Mark Taylor is what made Squatch so good. He could play the drums, he could dance. He just was a physical comedian. He could do it all, and I think that once you get over the fact that you were saying this is kind of a non sequitur, this doesn't really work, right? But he brought it to life so well in his performance that then they're like, all right, hey, Squatch, he's ours.
Oh, I get a question when you said about you have to create the backstory and things like that. First, when you left being the Fanatic, were the other mascot, and then you started doing this. I mean, do you sit there and think? Would you meet and sit? It would be just you, and you would just create like writing a screenplay? Because it's very fascinating to sit there and go. You'd think, like John said, most people. I know you, so I know it's different, but most people think it's a mascot. What's doing there? A few owners. You said you had to create a whole character and a backstory. Would you guys go and would you have like meetings in a big think tank and just sit there and spin around like the same way a sitcom gets ideas? You go, oh well, this wouldn't work. I mean, because what was that? I mean, how did you develop that?
In the very beginning with the Phillies, and this was my first lesson, was that the Phanatic became a big success quickly within a couple of weeks. And we were being asked to go out to appearances. And so I had enlightened leaders with the Phillies, Bill Giles, Dave Montgomery, the Carpenter family. Without going into detail, the bottom line was they were enlightened leaders. They hired people, they trusted them, they let them do their thing. When they made mistakes, they would debrief and say, okay, that's probably not a good idea. Let's do something else. And that's the way they treated me. So after these events, I'd come back and say, I'm really frustrated. And the group, we'd have young people, we'd have leaders, and they go, well, what's going on? They'll ask me, what are you? And I would point to the name on the back of my jersey, which was Phanatic. And they go, we know that you're the Phanatic, but are you an aardvark? Are you an anteater? And I wasn't a performer, Coop, so I didn't and John, I didn't understand, like, in that I was like a performer where the curtains open up and they go, "You're on," and I have no idea who I am. So I didn't understand that was the struggle I was having, was I needed to know who I was. So I said in frustration, I said, "The Fanatic looks like a Darwin experiment gone bad." And one of the young people said, "That's it. You're from the Galapagos Islands." And from that has been a $1 million to a multi-million dollar backstory. They've written books, they've got bobbleheads, and the Phillies, this is how much they care. After I had retired, I had somebody who ran trips to the Galapagos Islands that said, "Hey, we think we should have a Fanatic and Phillies themed trip to the Galapagos. That's what we do." We just got back with Alex Trebek and we did a Jeopardy theme to the Galapagos. It was amazing, successful. We'd like to connect with you and do it. I said, "Well, I don't work for the Phillies anymore." And I put him in touch with the Phillies. Well, that turned into the Phillies inviting me to come with Tom, the Fanatic's best friend, and the Fanatic to go to the Galapagos to film his birth because it was for a video called Time Traveler Fanatic. And he went back in time to see his birth at the Galapagos Islands, which was Darwin making a mistake, but we didn't get into the details of that. So this is the caring. So I started realizing that story really was important for the Fanatic's success, and I didn't realize it at the time. It just solved an issue. So what I do with my clients now, we have a mascot intervention. We start at the beginning and say, "You have to work on your story." So we do a creative with the people. We bring in all the constituents. In this case, it was Delaware Tech Community College, and we brought them all into a room, all the people that represented all of the campuses. They have 4 campuses in Delaware. Each campus is a little different, non-traditional students, and they just dive into their history, and we start pulling little nuggets out, and their job is to craft a beginning, middle, and end of a story to get us started. And then once they like that beginning, middle, and end, we get it to our designer and they read the story. They research the entity that we're working with, in this case, Delaware Tech Community College, and they spend 3 or 4 weeks crafting that story. And then once they get that story right, then the designer actually is inspired to draw a character with some of the elements of that story manufactured in visually. It's phenomenal to see it work. And once it comes out and people say, "That's kind of a strange little thing on its shoulder. Oh, you didn't know? That's a birthmark." And the birthmark looked like a diamond. And a diamond is part of the brand of Delaware Tech Community College. And he always had that. People, his friends made fun of that. Now he realizes that he's meant to be here because he's going to where the diamonds are. That's a diamond. It's all of these little nuggets, and it's really, really magic when it gets done right. And my job is to steward that process, and they do the work. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And besides the ones that you've been directly involved in as a character, what's your favorite sports mascot?
I'm gonna get slaughtered for this. Well, my favorite is the Fanatic. Okay, let's clearly I'm so connected to the Fanatic. He will always be my favorite. But there was the character in San Diego, a minor league team, the Missions at the time. It was a AAA team, and I think it was for the Texas team, but I could be wrong. But it was Puffy the Taco. So Puffy the Taco was an actual taco. His head was lettuce. Let's have fun with that. And the performer, all he wanted me to do was tackle him. And he said, "I'm going to run around third base and I want you to tackle me," because I was there as the Fanatic. And I'm like, "Well, and he said, "No, I just tackle me. Don't worry about it." So I absolutely slammed him. He comes around third base and I could hear the wind come out of him. And I said, "Oh my God, I think I killed this kid," because it's a tiny little character. So the kid comes in and he's euphoric. I don't know, maybe he was a masochist. And he's euphoric. "Oh my God, that was great. I loved it. You're the best." And I just can't forget him. He was a human taco. And I think he may still, not him, but the character may still be there. And, I was afraid he was going to ask me to run him over with the four-wheeler and then I might kill him. So I was like, I didn't want to push it. But the passion that he had for performing and he didn't care about whether he got hit. He just wanted to see Puffy get smashed, and everyone laughed. They thought it was funny. And apparently he did this every night. He had somebody else in the crowd would tackle him, and that was his thing. So
Now, you mentioned earlier about you wanted to go into become an entrepreneur. And the reason me and John always talk, are entrepreneurs born, or how is it bred? Well, for you, I mean, your dad was a legendary football coach, so he was not an entrepreneur. And you said your brother worked in the business. So where do you think your entrepreneur gene came from? Because, I want to get into your speaking, but, right out of the box after the Philly Fanatic, you went into this and then you parlayed into speaking. So where do you think your entrepreneur gene came from? Because John, if you don't know, David's dad was Tubby Raymond, a legendary football coach for University of Delaware, which the stadium is named after him now. So you don't come from an entrepreneurial background because your dad was a football coach, which,
I wanted to be a professional athlete, Coop. I was small and slow. That's why my dad told me to learn how to be a kicker, which I was a really great athlete in high school, and I played all positions on the football team, but I was the punter and the place kicker because my dad and I went and kicked. I was a punter for my father. My brother went on to punt for Virginia. So, I had a good run as an athlete with very little natural ability. So it's a great question. I'll tell you what I know I am, Coop, and what I was meant to be was a performer. Because that's where I get the feeling like this is why I'm supposed to be here. The entrepreneurial spirit came in that what I knew I didn't want to do was age out with this physical crucible, hard work that I was doing, age out and be young because this is like an athlete. They age out for their sport, but they're still young. And so I thought my best path would be to use the talent I have as a performer and build a business or own the rights to a character. And so I wasn't thinking entrepreneur. I was just thinking, I want to own what I do. I'm going to use my talent to create a character that has demand and I'm going to own it. It didn't work out that way. And I don't think it was supposed to. And then what I realized with the real intellectual property I had was how to do this well. Because when I was doing it, I was just thinking I was lucky. There's a whole story about my mom went deaf when I was 3 years old. So I was spending hundreds of hours honing a nonverbal performance craft without knowing it. And I give the credit to the Phanatic's personality to my mom giving me that skill set. So I've always been a performer, but the entrepreneurial part of it was a means to an end to be able to get value out of my performance. And then I realized I also had some intellectual capacity in terms of IP to teach others how to do it, and then to teach performers. I taught and continue. I have an asynchronous online mascot class that people can take to learn how to be a mascot. So the entrepreneur was just something I needed to do to be able to, just work on my talent as a performer and create value so I could drive revenue through that. And what it morphed into was really a consultancy to teach people how to do it. And then the speaking just became a part that I was always being asked to do by the Phillies. Go out and tell them why we have the Phanatic. And I was the Phanatic's best friend. I was speaking for the Phanatic. And we have the Phanatic because he transcends wins and losses. He makes people feel good just by showing up. We were doing funerals and we were doing bar mitzvahs and weddings, and we were walking into hospital rooms where a family might be dealing with really an awful tragedy. And you walk into that hospital room and they're thrilled to see everybody's laughing. They're hugging me. They're crying tears of joy. And they tell me when I would leave, and this goes on today, by the way, that I'd leave and they'd say, "Thank you for giving us the best medicine. We really needed that today." And those things, as I started to grow older and becoming more aware of the value of what was happening, I started studying positive psychology and recognized everything the Phanatic did for me is what positive psychology tells each of us to do every day. Express gratitude, be kind, make sure that you are getting physical activity, get good sleep, don't drink too much, don't smoke too much, but also have great friendships, great relationships. I mean, these are all the things the Phanatic was doing and doing for me without me realizing it. And so that just became my passion, was to tell everybody why the Phanatic is so powerful beyond the silliness. Inside the silliness is a superpower. That superpower is your knowledge to know what you need to do every day to build sustainable happiness and to look forward to the challenges you're going to have in life because they've been given to you to be the human being you're supposed to. I was supposed to be the Phanatic, to learn this through real life experience, to see that the Phanatic saved my life during a time when I felt like I couldn't go on any longer. These are all things that I talk about from the stage, and they're doing a documentary about the Phanatic Coop that's coming out at the end of the year. I can't wait for you to see it. called Big Fan, that's telling all the story we're talking about now. I got some great filmmakers that are working on this project, and I've just seen the rough cut for the first portion of it. I'm thrilled. So you can tell I'm passionate about it. It is the story that I love to tell, and it's all come from an unexpected superpower that was baked into that fur.
See, and it's funny you say, you wanted to get the intellectual part and stuff like that. And John and I also talk about how a lot of times entrepreneurs are very instinctual. So you sat there, you knew at some point that, you were smart to recognize that. And I think that that's something about an entrepreneur is they have to have instinct. And as you said, your first one didn't go that well. And so you're going to fail. And we always say that, like, entrepreneurs don't know, we're in an age where everybody's an entrepreneur. And I say, my paper boy, if I had a paperweight, he'd be like, I'm an entrepreneur. But it's a thing where how did you deal with failure when it happened? Because, John was talking to a few of your friends and even you have gone through stuff where it hasn't worked. So how did you deal with failure? Those first few failures that you're going to run into, how do you deal with them?
Well, I just think that was my background as an athlete, and watching my father be very, very successful, but a ton of failures along the way for him. And I mean, as a joke, but I almost think I don't think I was smart enough to be stopped by a trip or a fall. And not a literal trip or fall, because a trip or fall with the Phanatic was winning. I went out and created a character that technically failing was successful. So pratfalls, silliness, slapstick humor, that was what the Phanatic's output was. I honestly don't think I was a deep enough thinker to not just take another step. I'd like to figure it out. I'm assuming it's the guidance of my parents, some beautiful people that taught me a lot. And it just never, losing, failing. I was an athlete without a lot of physical skill, and I worked hard. I was a little bit of a jerk. I was the gym rat. I was poking the big guy to try to get him angry, and then I'd run faster than him to get away from so, I was somewhat of a prankster. But I just didn't see it as failure. This is all part of it, right? And then when I got the Phanatic, my prime directive, as told by Bill Giles, my boss's boss, said, David, just go out and have fun. As long as it's G-rated fun, you're not going to make a mistake. But if you're not enjoying yourself while you're in this costume, it's not going to work. And the most brilliant advice you could ever have was that simplicity of that. So that meant if I wasn't feeling well a particular night, I would take more breaks than I would normally do. I'd only go to the costume for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'd take a break. If I was physically tired, that was the time to take a break. And then what that drove in terms of performance was it made the Phanatic's appearances special. He wasn't out all the time. One, physically, I couldn't handle it. But if everybody had access to the Phanatic all the time, he wouldn't be special. So he would pop up over here, and then he would disappear. Then he'd pop up over here, and he'd disappear. So all of those things to me felt like, and it's my life challenges that almost took me. And my mom died, my marriage fell apart right at the same time, and here I am trying to be a clown. And, so that was the one that almost got me, Coop. I almost didn't overcome that. And the beauty of what I was doing when I got into that costume was I disappeared. It wasn't me, it was the Phanatic. I'd honed that personality so much that Dave Raymond got to take a break for a couple of hours. And then I realized during this really difficult time where I wanted to quit as the Phanatic, I started paying attention to how I felt when I was done doing an appearance. And I went, I don't want to quit this, because even though I felt like I was hopeless, I'd get done with the Phanatic and I would be a little tick above hopeless, which was a great place to be, because you weren't thinking of bad things to solve your solution with no thought of permanency. This is suicidal ideation, and I can see why it's so deceptively horrific that you just would never think you were there, but suddenly you are. And the Phanatic kept pulling me out of me. And over a year's time, I didn't need any more help. I just knew that the Phanatic was where I needed to be. And then it was later that I started studying what this meant psychologically. And then that's where I formed my keynote, which is called The Evolution of Happiness. And it's all about powerful fun, which is what the Phanatic did so well. So I appreciate the question. I wish I could really answer it. And that's why I've kind of gone on this long-winded answer. I don't know why I was able to fail and not let that stop me. But I really believe in faith and fate, and I believe I was supposed to be doing this. And so that's my best answer is I couldn't fail because I was supposed to be doing this.
Yeah, that's interesting, Dave. That's something that I've identified, and Steve and I talk about this almost every week, is the failing and continuing to try is what I say is an entrepreneur, because the ones that quit, they're not entrepreneurs. And another interesting thing about you, Dave, as you were talking, is another thing I've sort of identified is there are creatives, and normally creatives, I haven't found them to be that great of entrepreneurs, and they normally need someone else to kinda give them that push because they're on the creative side, and I've seen all kinds. I mean, even people that build apps, I consider them creatives, right? Because they 'Cause they're just creating, but then when you try to get them to do anything, with that, it's a little more difficult, but you seem to be someone that had a little bit of both. So, in my purview, that's pretty rare, I think.
Well, thank you. And I think of Rick Rubin when you're talking. His book, The Creative Act, was transformative for me because he talked in a very deep way about what being creative was. But he did both. He did both exceptionally well. He was able to identify creatives and be creative himself, and then make great value as an entrepreneur. He's a legend in the music industry, and if you haven't read that book, it is if you've been in the creative world and you know people who are creative or you feel that heartbeat inside of you, this book like speaks to you. And you can open it up and read it at any point, or you can read it front of because I'm anal retentive. So I read it page one to the end of the book. And I mean, I just couldn't put it down.
And, other than the divorce, did you run across any legal issues, while you were tell us about those. Those are always the best stories for me.
The Fanatic was sued more than any other character in the history of Mascots. Yeah, you know, a bump, a bruise, a broken crane, but also some really horrific accidents that, upon legal review, the Phillies were not responsible for it. I mean, there is some responsibility you take as buying a ticket for a sporting event. So there were those, but the biggest one was just happened relatively recently was in the world of copyright law. If I create something and then I sell it to you, I have the right 35 years later to come and see, have you been a good steward of the copyright? Did you pay me what was reasonable to pay me for that copyright? And I can come and wrestle that copyright away from you, even if I have a deal with you that said you pay me and into perpetuity you own it. So the creators, the people who said they were the creators of the Fanatic, and there's no question that they were, but it was also a collaboration with Bill Giles. They came to the Phillies and said, "You've got 1 year warning. You have to come a year ahead of time before 35 years is up." And you can. And they came. The people who designed for the Phillies and sold, and the Phillies bought the copyright for the Fanatic, came back and said, "You didn't pay us enough." And it was a very interesting legal battle, and it ended in a good positive solution where the judge said, "I'm not ruling on this because it's going to make me look bad. This law was created for a starving artist like the woman who created the Nike swoosh. Phil Knight didn't leave her hanging. He came back a number of years later and gave her millions of dollars for the work that she did while he was in college, and she drew the swoosh, and that was what Phil Knight used to build Nike visually." So he took care of it earlier. Now she would have had the right to go back to him 35 years later and say, "Hey, you owe me a lot more than whatever it was that he paid her." So the Phillies eventually got to a solution where they didn't want to own the Fanatic. I was actually hired by the Phillies to create derivative marks to make the Fanatic look like he was evolving and changing, so that if they were to win the lawsuit, we would have a Fanatic with those derivative changes. So the judge was mad at us. The judge was mad at them. And she said, "Look, you get in a room and figure this out because this is not going to work." And they did. And they negotiated. The Phillies paid them a settlement, and the original Fanatic is back at home where he's supposed to be. For me, and I had to be deposed on Zoom for like 3 days to explain my knowledge of what happened, and then what we do now to create characters. And that truly what it was Bonnie would submit a drawing and Bill would give her feedback and then she would change it. This is what we do. So we're collaborating with our clients all the time to get them to a character that they say, okay, that's it. And so it's, these changes. And then when you sell that copyright, you have to sell it for a reasonable amount during that time period. And all of that, I think, were facts and well debated. And this takes me to a situation where I appreciate attorneys and the judicial process. It's very smart of this woman to say, I'm going to rule this, and you're going to get this baby, and you're going to get this baby. And both of you are legally right, but you both kind of bended the rules a little bit. So I'll do that if you want me to do it, but I think you ought to sit in a room and figure this out. And I mean, that's really pretty. That's when you see the justice system work correctly. And copyright law is really a little bit strange.
Yeah, that's not my area, and it's never really been my area. Even though I was in entertainment law, I never really did anything copyright related. But I honestly didn't know about this 35-year rule, and there's just something unfair about it to me. And let me tell you why. Yes, the Nike swoosh, or the any other creative thing, there's some value in that. But we made a deal. I told you I would pay you this amount of money, and you said you would create this for me. And then I took this thing that I bought from you, so now that I own it, and I turned it into this big thing that you wouldn't have done, because if you could have, then you would have done it and wouldn't have sold it to me. So now why would you get paid for all of my labor? See, that doesn't sit well with me at all.
I would have loved to have you be on our side, because that makes sense. But that's the problem, John. Law doesn't always make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't always make sense, and a lot of it has to do, it's not supposed to. Justice is supposed to be blind, but there's so many instances where it's well, that doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel fair. You made millions, and I'm just this poor starving artist. Okay, but when you're a poor starving artist, I paid you for a piece of art.
That's interesting. So I think the heart of this concept was to protect starving artists. So the person with a couple of sheets of paper that has created an opus, and then but has no ability to get it out there, right? So the publisher does that and pays them what would be considered a pittance even at that time, which is not what happened with the Phillies. Phillies paid him just a little bit under $300,000 in 1983, I guess it was. That was a pretty good fee. So I think what the judge didn't like was that, yes, we could create derivatives and we could have the Fanatic look essentially the same, except for some of these minor changes, and we get to own that. And yes, they could come back after 35 years and say that they weren't properly compensated. You're both right. But the answer is, I'm going to give you this one and I'm going to give this one to the Phillies, and nobody wins. Nobody wants that. So it took a lot of time and spent a lot of money on lawyers' fees to get them to a settlement, which probably could have been settled in the first few months, and then it would have been over. Instead, it dragged on.
See, now that's the part that bothers me, because I know that it's the lawyers, right, that are the problem, and I'm saying that as a lawyer, but I know, right? I know that it's some lawyer out there hunting for intellectual property that's 35 years old, so that he can contact some people and go, "Hey, you mean you only got $300,000 for this? Well, that's unfair." That's the part that bothers me, because there's still a part of me that loves those old shows. They had such integrity, and it was all about justice. And now you have all of this, it's all just money driven at this point. And there's nothing wrong with money. I'm an entrepreneur, but I think you have to give value. And if the value is, hey, I can take it out of this guy's pocket and stick it in your pocket, and so you'll be happy and he'll be upset, that just doesn't sit well with me.
I agree with you. It's driven by time and money, but to have a judge like that, I mean, she settled it about as well as you could possibly settle it. You know,
Now we're talking about value here. And when you're speaking, where is the value? Like, how do people find you? Do they sit there and we know it's valuable and you've written a book? I have the book. how do people find you? Because you do have you give a good value, and you do have that celebrity connected to it. Even though you say you were the friend of the fanatic, you are a celebrity. I mean, that's as easy as that. But how do people find you? Because do you think you find yourself getting hired because you are Dave Raymond, the fanatic's best friend? Or do people do the research and find out and say, no, we really like your message, bring it?
You've, in a nutshell, asked a question that has always been our biggest challenge. We get overwhelmed by that, and they go, "Oh, you were the fanatic." And so let's say Delaware Valley from, from up, let's say upstate New York all the way down to say Virginia is kind of an area where the fanatic is known so well, and is known all over the world really. But to the level of understanding about the fanatic, that's kind of my area. So people a lot of the times will hire me first because of that pull, and then Nat Measley, my manager, will give them the understanding of the value. Yes, David is going to be fun. He's going to be funny. He's going to tell great stories. You're going to learn about the history of the fanatic and why it was important. But then you're going to hear the heart of his story, how in the midst of this amazing job, he got slammed with life. And so it's his job to show the value in terms of why is this message good for your audience? Because every audience that I research, I study, I understand what association I'm going to, and I tell everybody at the beginning, I want them to forget all about what they do in whatever work they're doing. So they know that their leaders care because they brought me in to say, I don't want you to think about work. I want to talk to you as a human being. And so the way they find me is that, but then we have to make sure they understand this is about sustainable happiness, well-being. Highmark just came on as a sponsor for the month of May. I'm going to speak 3 times a week for the 4 weeks in May, and Highmark is sponsoring me because they have a really strong mental health initiative, because they want their customers to be healthy, and mentally healthy is really a devastating um, illness the mental wellness illness is really destructive in the healthcare. One of the reasons why healthcare is so expensive is because of mental health issues. So it's a great partnership, and they understand that while I'm going to be entertaining and engaging, people are going to walk away with the understanding of how they can be better. So what we try to do is market ourselves. If you go to my website, you won't hear anything about the fanatic until like about the 3rd page. And it's teasing it. Dave's got an unexpected savior, somebody who helped him. You'll know that savior, but right now we want to talk more about what Dave will do. And then the fanatic comes out later. This pin is green fur. It's not just green. So we want to have touch points with the fanatic because I owe that experience to everything I talk about. But if they're looking for their people to know that you care of them as leaders, bring me in to tell them how they can be better human being, and then ultimately the owner, the president, the people that are running the company know that their people will bring that to work too. And this whole concept of bringing your whole self to work to feel trusted, cared for, and safe. That's one of the things you need to do is teach your people how to be good outside of work. And then they go, oh, that's really nice that my leader wants me to be happy with the people that I care about the most. And then I'm going to show up at work. I'm more loyal to them. And this is what the Phillies did to me. I'd have walked through fire for Bill Giles or Dave Montgomery because of the way they treated me. And with a 21-year-old kid, they gave all this trust to. And the job, go out and have fun. I'm like, oh, and my editing was G-rated fun, but they let me fail. And maybe this is an answer to your previous question. They let me fail, and they didn't beat me up about it. They didn't dock my pay. They didn't threaten to fire me. They just said, let's talk about why you did it. And then when I would tell them, well, this is why I did it. And it was funny. The fans liked it. And then they would take a moment. They might ask me to do it again so they could watch it and be in the stands. I mean, this is amazing for 20-year-old kid. I would have just told myself, if I was managing me, don't ever do that again, or you're going to lose this job. They collaborated with me. So I just think it was all meant to be.
And that was a family-owned team, the Phillies?
Yes, it was the Carpenter family, which my dad, the reason why I got the job was the Carpenter family owned the Phillies, but they also invested heavily in the University of Delaware and the programs there. And they loved one of the reasons why my dad came to Delaware was because Bob Carpenter Sr. was investing money in the athletics program at Delaware. And so he got to know Bob. My dad was a captain of the Michigan baseball team. He was actually more baseball than football in terms of an athlete. And he came to Delaware. And then when he saw I wanted to be a football coach, he was happy to help me. But he said, "Hey, I'll get you a summer job with the Phillies. You're a sophomore at Delaware. Go work for the Phillies. You'll never know what happened and who you might meet." And I got that access because he knew the owners. And then the owners let Bill Giles do the silliness because they were more focused on bringing a winning baseball team to Philadelphia, and they knew they needed to sell tickets. So they hired Bill, who had just got done helping to build the Astrodome, and he was all about powerful fun, is what I call powerful fun now. He knew how to get non-baseball fans to come in and see what it was like to come to a Phillies game. And, it just was, it was special to be, the convergence of all these things to create this fanatic that's going to be alive forever, long before I'm gone or long after I'm gone, it wasn't just an accident. I mean, that's what I believe.
Before we go, John and me always want to get advice from our guests for a young entrepreneur or for a young business person. And since you talk about the power of fun and everything, what is your advice for someone getting into the business world right now? A kid who wants to start out, like John, mentors a lot of people. I mean, do you mentor anyone, and what advice do you give to them?
I do. I'm blessed with a lot of the business students at the University of Delaware. I speak to the entrepreneurial class every year. I've gone to the econ classes. I think that, I just repeat some of the advice I had is you need to show up. And, in this world today, this could be misinterpreted, but just hear me out. Go do whatever they ask you to do so you can prove your value. When you do that, you will be valuable. The thing that's sad is you can outperform about 85% of your competition by just showing up and being prepared. So you show up on time and you're prepared. You beat 85% of your competition as young people today, because it's just not one of those standard things. I was raised by an amazing football coach. He knew how to motivate people. He knew what to tell you, Coop, and then he would tell me something different, and then he would tell John something different because he got to know each one of us, and he knew John needed a smack upside the head. I needed an arm around my shoulder, and Coop, you needed a mixture of both, right? So I think it's all boiled down to if you prove your value, you will be valuable. And I think that's a great step. And then I would, some of the things biblical, be quick to listen, slow to talk, and slow to anger. I mean, these are classic ways to get along. Ask people questions and listen. What do you do? Where are you from? How did you get here? What's your favorite thing to do here? How do you see me working here? What should I do to make this a better place? And then listen. That's something I didn't do well. And then I was put inside a character where I was not allowed to talk, so I had to listen. It's pretty amazing. And I had to feel what the audience wanted. And so in essence, I was asking the audience, "What do you want?" And they were always telling me when I listened. So I think listening and proving your value are two of the most important things I tell young people.
I have some advice that I need, Dave, that you might be able to help me with. So I've always thought that I want my son to be a kicker because, and I thought that with my first son, but he wanted to play basketball and he was a good high school basketball player. But I have a younger son now, and I want him to be one of the cool kids, but I don't want him to get hit. So I think being a kicker is the way to go. What's your advice to get him to become a good field goal kicker?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what my dad said. He gave my brother and I. My brother was 2 years older than me. He gave us a bag of footballs, and he said very clearly, "Look, I was a really good baseball player, but I wasn't much of a football player. I'm small and I'm slow, and you have my genes. So hey, I'm not saying that you couldn't overcome, but if you get the skill of kicking." So what I would do today, because there's so many good coaches, I'd find somebody who taught kicking, because they have camps, they do that, and then I would tell my son, they have to fall in love with it, which my brother and I did, because we would punt back and forth and we'd play a game where your punts, you'd catch the ball, and that's where you had to kick from, and you could drive your competitor out of the end zone by continuing to kick further than he did. So my brother beat me all the time. And so we just would play games. And so we punted and we place kicked. And when we started kicking, they still had straight on kickers, and the soccer style kickers were very rare. We happened to have a great soccer style kicker, Mark Samaniski, come to Delaware, and we were the coach's son. So he taught us how to kick soccer style. I was left footed. My brother was left footed too. He was actually ambidextrous, but he kicked left footed. I kicked left footed. And we just kicked and kicked and kicked and kicked and kicked, and we loved it. So your son ultimately would have to enjoy it. But I think maybe by showing him that you could be on any football team, you could be the most important player on that team. Now the lineman, yeah, not good. The lineman won't tell you that. The lineman will tell you you're not a football player, and the defense hates you because you're not hitting and you're not getting hit. But you can also tell them, yeah, well, I'm smarter than you are. But I loved being a kicker when I came to Delaware, but I also worked as a demonstration offensive player. So I got hit all the time, but I was the coach's son. I wasn't going to go just be a kicker. So I went and got the what kicked out of me running demonstration offense. And so the defense liked me. They got a chance to take their anger out on their head coach by smashing his son. And two, I got to be friendly with the defense. They became the people that I really hung out with. And they loved the fact that I was not frightened to get smacked around. And then by the time I became the starting punter, I wasn't allowed to do that because they didn't want to get me hurt. But I had already proven myself to be, strong enough to take that type of beating. And then, but I love the fact that you're a father and you want to excite your kid about kicking, because no joke, scholarship to college, maybe a multi-million-dollar career as a kicker in the NFL. It's not easy to do that, but you can't get there unless you go and love it and practice.
Dave, how can people get in touch with you?
DaveRaymondSpeaks.com. That's where all of the information is about speaking, and there's a link on that site to go to where we do the mascot work as well.
And people, you can go to my website, coopertalk.net. I have 1,058 episodes up there. And in fact, in 2 weeks, I'll be interviewing Morgan Fairchild. I'm spending an hour with Morgan Fairchild. Yeah, you can email me, Cooper at coopertalk.net. Also go on to YouTube and find past episodes of my old show, The Coop Tank. It won an award. Dave's been on it. It's always a good roundtable. And, Lawsuits and Lessons, you got to go subscribe. You got to go watch past episodes. We always have some great knowledge. And John, you tell them where we can find you and give us all your good closing info, because you always wrap the show up.
All right. You can find me at defendmybiz.com. First of all, thank you, Dave. We really appreciate your time. I know that you get paid for this, so thank you for blessing us with all the great stories and all the information. Cooper, thanks. You're great as always, keeping the show going.
Any closing knowledge, John?
Well, I don't know if it's knowledge or not, but maybe some advice. And the advice is buy low, sell high.
All right. Well, people, please subscribe to us. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks with another great guest. And thank you to David. Thank you to John. And you all have a great weekend.